Okay, can I please have a motion and a second to re-enter into public session? Motion by Mr. Isernia, seconded by Mr. Reynolds. All in favor? Good job. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Wednesday, October 6, 2021 regular meeting of the Sachem Board of Education. Can everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and then remain standing for a moment of silence for all of our troops overseas. I'd like to hand it over to Dr. Pelletieri for the superintendent's report.
Thank you very much. We're going to jump right into the presentation of the 2020-2021 financial statements by external auditors EFPR PLLC.
Thank you. I am Brent Jensen. I'm a director with EFPR Group, and we performed your annual audit. The audit process begins with a meeting with the audit committee that happened back in May of this year and includes 1 week of on-site field work where we do work in regards to your financial statements, your extra classroom activity funds, and the compliance with federal programs. At the conclusion of the audit process, we provide financial statements that your management reviews and approves, and then we provide them to the audit committee. That meeting was held last week on September 29th with the audit committee, and we went over in detail the financial statements. The financial statements will contain an unmodified or clean opinion in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. Also, you will have a report on internal controls in relation with government auditing standards, which will contain no reportable items. There would be items such as significant deficiencies or material weaknesses. As I was saying, there are none. You will also have an unmodified or clean opinion in regards to the audit performed in accordance with uniform guidance, which is federal compliance standards. We did test work over 2 of the major federal programs this year and found no findings, no reportable items. Lastly, we will also provide an unmodified or clean opinion in relation to the district's extra classroom activity funds and a financial statement that is performed on the cash basis of accounting and on cash receipts and cash disbursements of those club activities. Management was a pleasure to work with throughout the audit process. They provided everything we asked for in a timely manner, and we had no issues that would be reportable in any way in the audit. In terms of audit adjustments, there were no what we would classify as audit adjustments. The only adjustments that occurred during the process were a collaborative effort to implement a new required Government Accounting Standards Board statement that was really quite complex into the structure of the financial statement. So we did assist a little bit in those adjustments, but certainly nothing that was a misstatement that required correction. On the district-wide full accrual financial statement, which includes a number of estimated actuarial items such as the other post-employment benefits and your participation in the state pension systems, you showed an excess of expense over revenue of $72.2 million. Your revenues increased on that statement by $4.4 million, which was mostly due to an increase in property tax levies and also some new federal aid, specifically the CARES Act funding. Your expenses actually decreased by $18.4 million, which is primarily due to actuarial changes in that other post-employment benefit obligation liability. What is really the much more important statement is the fund statement, specifically the general fund, as that is how the district operates. And in your general fund, you showed a negative change in fund balance this year of $2.6 million, with revenue increases of $5 million over the prior year and expenditure increases of $17.3 million over the prior year. That occurred primarily because you did substantially more in transfers to other funds this year than you had in prior years. Overall, the general fund balance decreased by $2.6 million, and $1.6 million of that was actually decreases in your various reserve balances. The unassigned fund balance at year end was $13.6 million, which was exactly the allowable 4% under New York real property tax law. So that's a basic summary of where you stand today. I'm going to get into a little bit of where the history was on the next page in 1 minute with the district, but I just wanted to, at this point, pause quickly and tell you that overall, right now, I would say you're in a strong financial position. You have the maximum allowable unassigned fund balance under state law. You have strong reserves in relation to your budget size. You have what you should have right now, and it lets this district operate in the most efficient ways possible. When we get into the next schedule, one example of that is you can see the declining debt service over year, and that is occurring partially because the district is able to fund certain capital items with the existing fund balance rather than always going out to debt and increasing the future obligations. So there are certainly benefits to the financial position you're in right now. On the board copy of the 11 by 17 sheet of paper gives a little bit of history. You certainly were, a few years back, kind of a cautionary tale of what can happen in a district. You got to a point where you had to make some real tough decisions to get the district back on sound financial footing. And this schedule is something we've been presenting really ever since to you. And we wanted to keep it in there and just keep it as a reminder of how that happened and a reminder of how the importance of concentrating on what your revenue and expenditure trends are year over year and how you're budgeting. You can see going back to 2011 through the 2015 period, in a 5-year period, the district used up more than $36 million of fund balance over just 5 years. So while you're certainly at a strong position today with approximately $60 million of fund balance, that can get chewed up pretty quickly if you start to let your expenditure trends outpace your revenue trends. The realities of school finance right now are that your revenue is going to trend at approximately 1% per year increase. You're going to get about a 2% tax levy increase. The state aid for the past 3 years has been completely flat and really has largely been pretty flat over the life of this. So you're not going to have significant spikes in revenue, except for certain one-time items that are coming up, such as the federal grants under the ARPA. But the long-term revenue that sustains the district is really going to be pretty flat. Your expenses are generally going to be increasing at about 2% minimum, just based on what's happening with your step increases, with your employee benefits, in the way that your CBAs work. So you already start off with that trend. So it's very important to know that and watch that closely in your budget so that you don't get yourselves back into a financial position where you are committing to long-term expenditures that don't have associated revenues that are long-term and match those expenditures. So that's pretty much my presentation. Are there any questions from anyone on the board?
Please, Jim.
I just want to reiterate something that you said today, but you also said at our audit committee meeting, and that's that you brought to our attention that there's a correlation between the revenue and expenditures, that the expenditures would outpace the revenue due to contractual obligations, et cetera. And you issued the same warning today by saying the revenue is about like a 1% increase per year, and the expenditures 2% increase per year. So that imbalance could grow quickly, especially if we start spending long-term money. Is that an accurate statement?
I would say that is accurate, that if it's not watched closely and considered with the decisions that the board makes, that you can certainly get that out of balance pretty quickly. That is exactly what happened previously. You do have some one-time funding that is going to grow your revenue for a short-term period coming up over the next couple of years. But then that's going to dry up and you're going to get back to these normal trend rates that we're looking at over time.
What is that money again?
So there's certain federal grants that have been given for the recovery from COVID that are one-time grants that there's no expectation that they're going to continue going forward.
Thank you.
John could probably give you more details as to the amount and exact nature of those grants.
Laura?
Thank you. And I would just like to say kudos to Mr. O'Keefe and his staff on a clean audit and good management of our funds. So one of the things I'd like you to address is our capital reserve fund, that now since we're putting money in that and we're taking care of our roofs and all those other things, we're not going to get hit like we used to in the past with the big time expenditures by using the capital reserves. If you could just touch on that a bit.
Sure. Obviously, the district went through a very tough financial time back about 10 years ago. And part of getting out of that was also kind of a little bit of neglect of potential capital needs because you didn't have the money to do them in the short term. You are turning that around now. You have active capital projects going at a number of the buildings throughout the district, and you've been funding that largely through contributions to the capital reserve and transfers from that reserve into the capital projects fund, which is the reason you see a very large growth in the transfers this year, because really you moved that money into capital projects. As I mentioned earlier, one benefit to doing it that way is if you look at the debt service over the past just few years, you were at $22 million in annual debt service in 2019. You brought that number down to just about $14.8 million this year in that short time. So if you are able to use that fund balance that you have to fund the capital projects, it reduces that financing expense you have going forward.
Right,
and
because
leaves more budget.
previously we would take out bonds and then you're paying for that over so many years
Yes,
after the projects are done. And that's what causes that debt. By doing it this way from the capital reserve fund, we don't incur that debt.
Yes, that's accurate.
Anyone else? Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Good evening. Thank you. I have just a couple other pieces of information from my report. Two things, primarily. I wanted to just be transparent in terms of our COVID-19 numbers thus far this year in our schools. In our 15 schools, we've had thus far reported 142 positive cases across the 15 schools. Those 142 positive cases resulted in 183 quarantines thus far, a little over one additional person per positive case. And so that is far better than we had last year, where we could put 20, 25, almost 30 kids out with each positive case. So those numbers are way down. Each time there's a quarantine, there is a concern, obviously, around supporting those students. Our quarantine support program is up and running, getting more efficient each and every day, I believe. There have been some concerns from parents. They can certainly reach out to me or the principals as well. Ms. Trombetta really has done a great job, as Erin is working with us as well around, Mrs. Hines, around streamlining that process, teachers contacting students and families to make sure that they offer that support. Again, that seems to be getting more and more positive feedback as we move forward. And any concerns, please reach out to me. Please reach out to the principals around making sure that that is set up and working. And the last piece for me really is last year, this district was able to purchase 7,500 Chromebooks for its students through grades 6 through 12 and its staff. We are finalizing the distribution of those this week. Grades 6, 7, and 8 are receiving their Chromebooks. 9 through 12 receive them as well. really an incredible effort by our technology department, our students, our administrators, our staff. Really proud of that effort as we leap into the 21st century teaching and learning. So just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention as well. Thank you.
Any questions? Yeah, please.
Chris, could you just remind folks about waiting PCR results?
Oh my gosh. Mr. Incernia, that's one of my notes. It's right here. PCR results. Thank you. I mean that. I really wanted to say that because we have had on occasion last year and this year, folks who have sent their youngsters in while awaiting PCR results because they're asymptomatic. It's not going to be a problem. I know that the rapid was what it was, but please do not send your child in if you are awaiting a PCR result for any kind of contact, asymptomatic, not symptom, whatever it is. Do not send your child in if you are awaiting a PCR result. We've had that happen again. It puts many people at risk and in peril, staff and students alike, everyone that person comes in contact with. I'm sending a letter home tomorrow. On Friday, we have our evacuation plan early dismissal. We have it annually every year on this weekend upcoming. It's 15 minutes early. You're going to get a letter probably tomorrow reminding folks of that. And I will also put in writing this statement that I just made about PCR results. Please do not send your kids in if you're awaiting a PCR. I'm going to stop saying please soon, but I am polite, so I try to say it aloud. Don't do it. Thank you, sir.
Anyone else? We'll move to letter E on number 1, approval of minutes for the September 22nd, 2021 regular meeting. Can I please have a motion? Motion by Ms. Slattery, second by Mr. Scavo. Any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Number 4 is visitors. We have 2 for agenda and 2 for non-agenda, so the non-agenda items will go at the end. For the agenda items, Mrs. Meredith Volpe.
Good evening. I come to you today with a few thoughts. I know times are crazy and I know there's many mandates that you as a group literally can't do anything about. But I'm sure you can understand the frustration us parents have these days. Everywhere we look, everything we know is changing. And then we see literal laws being broken. And we are told that the BOE trustees take an oath to uphold the Constitution, yet you're being forced to abide by the breaking of the rules. It's all unfair to us. It's unfair to you, but mainly to our children. They're watching. How confusing must all of this be to them? I'm not here to debate masks or vax. I'm here to ask you to start being more proactive. Open your eyes to the fact that politics are being played here and our kids are the pawns. You may not be able to go against the mandates, but you sure as hell can speak up and stop standing in the way. The fact that today is October 6th and our committees that were supposed to start their terms on July 1st haven't even been approved yet is disgraceful. The fact that one trustee brings it up every time and time again, meeting after meeting, and she goes ignored is disgraceful. It's time for you to do your jobs. All we hear is your hands are tied and things need to be fixed at a higher level. Well, we don't even have a legislative committee 3 months after their supposed start date. Yet some of you play more politics up there than our politicians. I've heard debates on not allowing a former trustee, myself, to volunteer on any committees or to be not to be on more than one committee. I've heard hemming and hawing on how many members committees should have. I've seen a lot of lip service, but have seen very little action. I'll tell you what, if I rescind my committee application, will you all then go ahead with the appointments tonight? This cannot continue on like this. I'm sick of this happening. I'll sacrifice my rights to be on any committee so that you all stop holding a personal grudge and do your job for the betterment of the community. Last year, we were saying how essential the BAC was. Seems this year we've treated them like our healthcare workers. We tossed them aside to say that they're no longer essential. In a few minutes, we'll be seeing a presentation, or actually we just saw the presentation on the audit that you've approved. Yet our audit committee only had to be approved because Laura made you realize that you absolutely had to do it. The more you try to say that you're up there with no agendas, the more we see your agendas showing. I know the BOE has real work to do, so stop micromanaging the committees and make the appointments immediately. I've seen less time and thought put into making the seating chart at the United Nations dinner.
Thank you. That was 3 minutes.
Sure.
Elisa Agavakian. And just so everyone knows, although it's not on the agenda, since Dr. Pelletieri spoke about COVID, that's why I'm putting it on the agenda for allowing to speak, in case anyone has a question. Please.
On Monday, my son woke up with a stuffy nose, so I kept him home because I knew his underlying sensory issues, he would not be able to handle the mask all day. Tuesday, he still had a stuffy nose, but he also had a math test, so I sent him in because a stuffy nose is not a good enough reason to stay home. I will not teach my children to avoid their responsibilities over every ailment that occurs in life. What I did tell my son is that if he was having trouble with his math, to go down to the nurse and I'll pick him up. In the afternoon, that's what happened, except the nurse now tells me that I needed a doctor's note or a negative COVID test, even though I explained his situation, that he had no other symptoms, but it did not matter. I now had to prove my child's health yet again in order for him to receive his required education. Your nurses are not doctors. Your principals and staff members are not doctors. You cannot sit here and demand that we take our children to the doctor for every sniffle. My copays are cheap, but if I have to prove my child's health, it's going to get very expensive. And what about families who don't have cheap copays, or the families who have 4 or 5 children in the district? With all the COVID grants that you guys accepted on behalf of our children, are you guys going to start paying for our copays, considering it is your non-medical staff that is demanding that I see an actual doctor to prove their health? Or maybe we can start using some common sense and realize that kids can have something other than COVID, that putting every single symptom under the sun on that list doesn't work. If that's the case, you better bring back the hybrid model, because there's not one child that is 100% healthy all year round. And if you think that people are going to be running to the doctor every time a child sniffles, you obviously don't have children. Let me remind you of the symptom list: headache, dizziness, anxiety, fatigue, increased heart rate, trouble breathing, congestion, vomiting. I'm sorry, that list is the symptoms for mask fatigue. This list is yours. Last updated 9/18/20, a full year ago. The only symptoms that I did not list were fever, no smell or taste, and diarrhea. Mask fatigue is 3 symptoms away from being COVID to you guys. Like I said, children can suffer other things than COVID. If you continue to read this list, it even states that not all symptoms are listed on here, not to mention that kids can be asymptomatic. On this very same paper, the part to be completed by a doctor, it states that the DOH doesn't even accept viral respiratory illness or viral gastroenteritis. My pediatrician explained to me what these illnesses are, and it includes flu, RSV, bronchitis, pneumonia, bronchiolitis, stomach flu, food poisoning, rotavirus, and a few others. So I could bring my child to the doctor, and they can still get denied if you don't like what my doctor diagnosed with my child. You guys are not doctors, yet you demand we see doctors and possibly deny the actual doctor's diagnosis. It makes no sense. We are no longer in a state of emergency, but in a pandemic of fear. Fear driven by authority and media using our own love for our family against us. These are not protective measures. This is tyranny. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to move on to number 5, business items, consent agenda A through F. Can I please have a motion? Motion by Mr. Isernia, seconded by Mr. Baumann. Any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Flip over to page 5 towards the top. Number 6 is personnel teachers, consent agenda A through O. Can I please have a motion? Motion by Mr. Baumann, seconded by Mr. Isernia. Any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Mrs. Capeline?
So joining us this evening, we do have Mr. Joseph Conklin, a new hire social worker here who's going to be joining us at the High School East. We're pleased to have him today in our audience. He is one of our new hires who have been searched high and low. He has got a lot of great experience working with youngsters from various age levels and respites, and has a real strong background in working with students and families to help support them in the school setting. So we'd like to welcome you today. We also had a few appointments here on the agenda for some probationary appointments, and they were unable to join us today. But we also would like to recognize Ms. Teal Belvedere, who is a special education teacher who is earning tenure. And we want to thank her for all of her hard work and with the special education population over at High School East, and look forward to her ongoing great works with our students. Congratulations.
Thank you, Mrs. Capeland. Number 7 is personnel on page 11. Support staff, consent agenda A through E. Can I please have a motion? Motion by Mrs. Slattery, seconded by Mr. Isernia. Any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Flip over to page 13 in the middle. Number 8 is contracts, consent agenda A through D, excuse me. Motion by Mr. Reynolds, second by Mr. Scavo. Sorry. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Number 9 on page 14 is budget transfers, letter A. Can I please have a motion? Motion by Mrs. Slattery, second by Mr. Scavo. Any questions?
So John, I guess this is for you. The summer transportation fee for $59,000, was that for the learning loss to provide our students with educational opportunities?
No, these would have been children attending a SESI program.
Oh, okay.
You're basically moving monies from a BOCES transportation line to a contractual transportation line. 'Cause instead of using BOCES in this particular instance, we used We in Town. And there were also some additional monies needed to be moved because the bills were slightly higher than originally anticipated.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. On the bottom of page 14 is number 10, Committee on Special Education, Consent Agenda A and B. Can I please have a motion? Motion by Mr. Baumann, seconded by Mr. Isernia. Any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Number 11 is monthly reports. Please.
I didn't know if you want to jump in. We did have a meeting with the policy committee last night. Mr. Vinnie Reynolds sat in, myself, Dr. Pelletieri, and Mary Ann Sadowski. I think starting next meeting will be 4 policies that'll be up for first reading. If I recall, some of them are just duplicate policies. We're going to cancel the old numbers, and we put them in a new format. And then there's some internet use policies, and the other one was the
Computer use, network use
networking.
policies.
So we'll see those coming up in the next meeting. And I know, Laura, you spoke about the audit committee, right?
I just had a thought. Last meeting, Rob, you brought up doing the open house with the elected officials, remember? So Dana Clayton and Sal Nicosia used to always have that here in like January, February, where we do like a town hall and we invite all the elected officials. It was very popular when we had the opt-out movement and different things going on. So when we talked about the legislative committee, we said we didn't want to do anything with it unless we had a charge. So I was thinking the board could charge the committee to put together like a town hall style meeting where we reach out to elected officials, and this way our community can have a dialogue with the elected officials. I know we've done it in this room, we've done it in the Little Theater, but we could reach out to Dana to see how she set it up and planned it, because she has the experience, and do something like that. So I was wondering what everybody thought of that.
Please, Mr. Kiernan.
I would be against that. I don't think that's what the legislative committee really should be for. I think we discussed the legislative committee a little bit in a past meeting where we said it'd been an at-large committee that we would put together when we needed it. I don't think, with all due respect,
No, that's fine.
us having an open town meeting with elected officials is really our role. I mean, I'm all for town officials showing up and speaking to the public, which they should, but I don't see us as a school board being the moderator of that. I think especially now, when we have such, divisive subjects, and it's an election year, and you know the politicians, they're just going to go up there and they're going to say whatever they need to say for election. But that's for the people to decide. I don't think we should be involved in that at all. That's just my
Well,
opinion. Please.
So can I just respond? So we'll have a difference of opinion, but Longwood every year hosts a legislative breakfast where they have, I'm sure we've all been to except for the new board members. So we all go, they have all the elected officials and all the students get up to ask questions, but it doesn't include the community. So what our legislative committee had always done here with Dana and Sal Nicosia was give the opportunity for our community to have a forum with our elected officials. We don't take a position as a school board, whether we're Democrat, Republican, we're just hosting it, just like, okay, so Sachem North, Patty, maybe you were there, when Anthony Piccirillo ran for legislator, Sachem North hosted the debate because they were both Sachem
Yeah, him versus Bill,
graduates
yeah.
running. So like I went and the kids were there, and it was a great way to show, the process and how to get involved in advocating and all of that. And all the students were there. And for me, that's how I sort of, I've always been involved in politics since I was young, but that's sort of for me, after everybody speaking about all of this, said instead of working against each other, if we can work together, I may have a different opinion than Meredith on something, but we're hosting a forum because I want all the politicians to say this and she wants them all to say that, but just to give our community a chance to interact. So that's just my thought.
Mr. Scavo and then Mr. Kiernan, please.
So at the last meeting, I proposed possibly doing a Long Island-wide legislative forum where Board of Education members would be able to meet with all of the legislators from all of Long Island, because we know, as a group, we're much larger as a big group than we are a small group. I did reach out to Bob Vecchio, had a conversation with him. Prior to reaching out to him, I did reach out to Doug Smith, let him know the concerns that communities are having, some of the issues they're dealing with. But my conversation with Bob Vecchio, who is the president of the Nassau Suffolk School Board Association, said that he was going to reach out to Lorraine Della, who's the executive director of that organization, and try to put together in a legislative forum where we can actually either have all of Long Island, or all of Suffolk, or all of Nassau, where he would want to do it Zoom for purposes of safety and whatnot, so that we can actually present the concerns that we have, in our community before the governor. Just, the concerns that we have, like I said, the governor making decisions without taking into consideration the impact that it has on a school district and the impact that it has on our kids. So he's working on that. He's going to get back to us as to whether or not he's able to pull out a county one or a whole Long Island legislative forum.
And so that would be just with,
It would be boards of education from all over.
but
Long
not
Island.
really with the community.
But we could take information and community questions and pose those questions. If
Okay,
we wanted to.
all right. My thought was just different. Bring back what we always used to have here for our community, our parents, with our officials. So mine is not specific for mask, or it's for any issue, any problem. Like I said, we had it for the opt-out movement. I was very, my son was a self-contained special ed student, and they took away the general diploma. He, had below a 70 IQ and had to pass 5 regents, which was ridiculous. So it gave open dialogue with our local officials. So that was sort of my thinking.
Mr.
But,
Kiernan, then Mr. Bauman, and then
Yeah.
Mr. Reynolds, please.
I mean, there's two different things going on here, two distinctly different things. One is trying to put together a town meeting and kind of moderating it. The thing that Rob is talking about, and I think the legislative committee that Longwood puts on is more in line with what Rob puts out. These are school officials, school board members, and the local elected officials that discuss issues that we're having as a school board. It has nothing to do with the community. So I don't have any issues with that. And the one time we did do something like that, I think that's unique. You had two Sachem North graduates going against each other. And of course, that's I think, a little different. I could even see and support that. But I go along pretty much with Rob's idea with Mr. Vecchio to get something countywide where all the school boards get together and talk to our elected officials of all the concerns that these people have and bring to us. And we could bring it to them. So I could support that.
Yeah, so I just want to understand. So what you're talking about is it the politicians coming here and spewing what they want to say, or is it hearing what they want to say?
So-
The public.
So as it was done in the past, everybody introduced themselves. Then all the community members filled out index cards, their names similar to here, and they would come up and ask questions, and then everybody had an opportunity. That's how the legislative breakfast works at Longwood too. So students submit questions or districts submit questions and they answer. So in my thinking, it was just like us hosting to our community and elected officials, very different than what Mr. Scavo is saying, which is fine. I'm fine with that. I just was thinking that we used to always do that here and we haven't done it. So it's like the community comes up. The board isn't involved. We're just involved through our legislative committee,
Right.
inviting everybody, having them come and setting it up.
I mean, I like the way it sounds if the public is speaking to the politicians, not so much the other way around.
Yeah, not just a stump speech. It's more of a Q&A.
Like, right.
It's like a Q&A.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that.
Mr. Reynolds?
Yeah, just again, two different things. So I agree with you, Laura. I like that idea because we've been telling the community, reach out to the politicians to drive these. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, great, thanks. So again, I think it's two different issues. So we can do both. You don't have to do one or the other. And I like, Laura, what you said, because I think we've been asking the community to drive the message home to the politicians, either side of these issues, right? So why don't we bring them in and let's host that. But again, to Matthew's point, I think it's the Q&A, let the community hear from them, not the politicians, right, outward.
It's the other way
It's a
around.
Q&A, right. So
Yeah.
I'd be open with that.
Mr. Isonia?
Just to alleviate some of Jim's concerns, is this something that we could approach Bevan with and maybe the PTA council could host that? So it's really coming right from the parents?
Listen, I mean, I got to be honest, that legislative committee that used to be done by Dana and Sal Trippi, who used to chair it, was a tremendous, tremendous undertaking. If you want to do something different and call it a town hall meeting and see the availability of our local officials to come, you would need one moderator to look at the questions, to
Right.
maybe, if there's duplicate questions, maybe, narrow it down to one.
Right.
But I wouldn't put it out as a legislative forum, say, a big tremendous thing. Rather a town hall meeting, maybe even in this room. But we got to.
That's where we used to have it,
Well, we
here
used to have
or
it
the
in
little
auditorium.
theater.
Yeah, the auditorium. We
No,
had-
no. It was always in the little theater or here.
Yeah. No, I remember, yeah.
We'll see
Oh,
attendance
okay.
and we'll just
Or
go from
It
there.
wherever.
all
That's
depends
not,
what it was, but the
Yeah.
thing is, like I said, we can call it a town hall meeting, see what their availability is right now, see if, look, if we're gonna get one or two officials, we have to determine whether or not it's worth it. If we can get 5 or 6 that represent our community that are willing to come out.
That's why I wanted to call Dana, because when her and Sal
yeah, we
did
can
it,
understand, yeah.
and see where it goes. And then if people want to come on the legislative committee, then I could work, or whoever board member doesn't
I mean, I
have
like
to.
Mike's idea with maybe having the PTA council is already, pretty established and,
Yeah,
maybe
that-
have them moderate, something like that.
That's fine too.
Jim?
Yeah, I would just like to remind everybody on the board here that you may have a Q&A with a politician, and you may ask a politician, what's your favorite color? And you're going to get a half hour of a politician's campaign. We realize that, right? I'm just doing this for the public, so they know they're going to come here thinking that we're putting together something that they're going to get answers from. They're not. That's the politician's way of campaigning. So I see it's going to happen, and I certainly am not going to stand in its way. I'm just cautioning everybody.
Please.
So for my experience in that, as I said, my son was a special ed student. Those town halls that Dana and Sal put together were my pipeline to meet elected officials, that when I advocated and went to Albany, that is how I met. So it all started here at Sachem, in those meetings, meeting elected officials, meeting Al Graff, going up to Albany, having one-on-ones. So for me, that was how my advocacy started. It's might be what you say, but I was successful in doing what I needed to do to get my son to have a diploma, and for other special ed, passionate issues that I fought for. So that was my experience.
Laura, so that's your good, Vinny, you're good with that idea? Rob?
Check the feasibility of it, see who's available.
Matthew? Mike? Jim? Okay. I'm not going to, obviously I have a conflict of interest, so I'm just going to stay out of this one, but we have enough, so let's do that.
Okay, so then, since no board member was on the legislative committee, and I have a lot of time on my hands, I would like to start, because I'll reach out to Dana, I have a relationship with her, and get the ball rolling that way. And then as soon as we approve members for the committee, then I can reach out to them. And of course, I'll keep you all updated and work from there. But I'm going to talk to Dana first.
Good. Any objections? Perfect. Any other updates? Yes, please.
Health Committee met tonight, and we talked about quarantines and quarantine teaching, and had updates from the building. In addition, the district-wide safety meeting was tonight, and I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Pelletieri for an update with that.
Mrs. Trombetta, thank you very much. I wanted to bring to everyone's attention that we did, in fact, conclude our investigation into a parent entry, inappropriate entry into East High School last year. And that information was referred to the district-wide safety committee tonight for reflection and for ideas. And I'm thinking of the, thank you. My gosh, Mike, I need you on that one. Recommendations for moving forward. So thank you very much.
Excuse me. The second part of public comment is non-agenda items. Lauren Muckatesh. And if I say it wrong, I apologize. I know that I say it wrong all the time. I apologize. I think it's the cue that throws me off all the time.
Yeah, it's, well, good evening. I know that there were quite a few meetings over the summer and leading into the beginning of the school year that were very charged emotionally, and there was lots of discussion around COVID protocols and mask mandates and whatnot. Well, school's been in session for about a month now. Mask mandates and a lot of the COVID protocols are not within the Board of Education's power to change. We kind of, I know how our hands are tied. We have to, go with what is mandated. With that in mind, I'm hoping to see these meetings turn back towards the purpose of educating our children and expanding their opportunities. I just wanted to speak about a couple of opportunities that I'm hoping maybe the board will investigate or look into. I only have elementary age children, so I'm just going to focus on that. I can't speak to middle school or high school kids. My kids go to Hiawatha. I have a kindergartner and a fourth grader. And I am very glad that the Family Connect nights have been streamlined so that parents across multiple schools can connect with their kids. But I'd like to see maybe some more streamlining in our elementary schools. I'm looking at like the stipend list for clubs. Nokomis has a technology club. I have two little boys that would love a technology club at Hiawatha. We don't have it. What Hiawatha did introduce this year, though, for our kindergarteners is our speech language pathologists are running what's called it Talk It Up. It's an interactive communication club for our kindergarteners who lost quite a lot of language development the last year and a half because of COVID and masks and not going to preschool or going more limitedly. I'd like to see maybe if we can get like a core group of clubs in all of our elementary schools. Our school has like, I think, a crafting club, something with math, kindness club, and then I think Renaissance club. We have 5 or 6, which is a good amount. They're elementary kids. Like they already have play sports and have instruments and religion and stuff on their plates. But some of the schools have very little and some have quite a lot. And I know that's dependent on teachers also being willing to run an activity, but maybe there's some way we can streamline like those opportunities a little bit more at the elementary level. I'd also like the board to consider looking at the issue of recess. It just came to my attention today that my kindergartner can lose recess for less than stellar behavior. He's 5. He talks too much. He came home yesterday and told me his clip got moved to yellow, and it was making him very nervousing, he said, because he didn't want to lose recess if he got moved to red the next day. So maybe there are other things we can do to encourage positive behavior, taking recess away from 5 and 6-year-olds who sit at a desk for 6.5 hours a day. It's their first full day school experience for the most part. Research upon research upon research shows this is not a good policy.
Thank you. That was 3 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I was just going to ask you why it's not. Yep. Mrs. Mukadesh, the recess discussion is going to be on the October 20th agenda for discussion from the board. Thank you. Nicole Mingrone.
I would like to start by saying that the fact that now parents who are now speaking up for their children are being put into the same category as domestic terrorists is a completely mind-boggling theory. No person deserves to be threatened and no one deserves to be belittled, not the board and most certainly not the parents. But for parents to be labeled as such because they are angry and advocating for their children is complete insanity. It should be no surprise to anyone that as we are dealing with the mask and vaccine mandates and losing parental control, we are being distracted away from what's happening in the children's classrooms. We are focused so much on what's happening with our children's health, as we no doubt should be, that we are forgetting what and who will be shaping their vulnerable and impressionable minds. Ms. Hines spoke at length regarding the social emotional learning, SEL, that was going to be taught to our kids. We are being told that the children are not being taught CRT. CRT is an ideology, not a curriculum. A simple Google search can tell you that. And yes, you are correct, they are not specifically being taught CRT. They have hidden the ideology into the SEL curriculum. CRT's teaching have discriminatory effect against students who are inappropriately defined as having privilege or being oppressors based solely on their race. The methodology of SEL is supposed to help students comprehend and understand their emotions and demonstrate empathy for others, which sounds nice except for the fact that the person who is helping shape the curriculum, someone Ms. Hines shared she was getting guidance from, is Sarah Cordova. Sarah Cordova agrees with articles like one called Dear Liberal White Teachers. In fact, on her Twitter feed, which has since been deleted, she encourages educators to read every word of it. In this article, educators are encouraged to stop protecting the children. The part of the article reads as this: stop protecting the children. You aren't. You are perpetuating whiteness, and you are protecting whiteness. You are protecting your place in oppressive systems and your own comfort. Stop being exhausted. All of you white people need to buck the F up and figure out what you are going to do about this mess, and then do something. Whiteness always wants to be protected itself, but does not give a holy hot kitten about the oppressive violence it causes. This article was shared by Dr. Laura Jimenez, whom Ms. Cordova follows, and I assume agrees with most of her ideology. Another part of the article reads, we have been telling you for literally centuries that whiteness is a dangerous colonizing force. Whiteness keeps showing up cloaked in blood, and you keep being surprised. I, for one, whom like many other parents that are raising mixed ethnicity children, whether that be white, black, brown, or purple, do not want my children to feel guilty for the color of their skin. SEL is leading the way for introducing distorted theories and activities aimed at making students feel bad about themselves. Whether they are white passing or just white, it shouldn't really matter. We're not here to judge people based on skin color. Rather, it's the character of the person that matters the most. I feel wholeheartedly the fear-mongering and guilt that is being placed on our children has no right to be instilled upon them in school. School is not a place to be taught core moral values. That is something that should be taught at home. That is the parent's job, which at this point I think all of you have forgotten that these are our children and you do not get to indoctrinate them to fit your agenda.
That was 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Meredith Volpe?
We have a large special ed population here in Sachem, and we have a great support staff with them. With that said, I'd like to ask that one of you make a motion to rename our special education department to our EC department, which stands for Exceptional Children. Schools in the South have done this, and it has a very deep impact on these students and their families. So everyone now refers to it as EC instead of SPED or special ed. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm on the wrong page. I don't have anything up for board discussion tonight. We have the planned recess one for next one. Good. Does anyone have any future board discussion items? Please.
Are we going to discuss the committees so we
said
can
that.
settle on it? So,
Do you want?
That's being finalized in exec tonight.
oh, okay. I'm sorry.
It's
So
on.
I missed it too. I had asked him when the last person was speaking.
Did anyone see it in there?
I might have missed
Maybe
it.
maybe I think it's in there and it's not? It says it. Yeah, okay. Thank you.
I missed it.
I'm forgetting everything else. I thought maybe I forgot it.
Anyone else? Yep. Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, Alex, I just wanted to maybe at the next meeting talk about possibly starting a middle school tennis program. I don't know if we could put out a poll or something to see how many families would be interested in that, if it's worth it to the district. I know we just talked about how great we're doing with money, so.
Matthew, can you just repeat?
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
A middle school tennis program. There are many, many districts throughout the island that have tennis programs in their middle schools, and they're not all Port Jeff and Three Village. Brentwood, CI, they have middle school tennis programs. So.
Good future agenda item. Yes, Mr. Isonia.
It's not really a future agenda item, but Chris, the concern about the elementary school clubs that was brought up, are those, as far as what club is going to be run, that's a building level decision? Do they work with their PTA, or how does that? And I guess, like you mentioned, you need interest from the staff member, or can they actually get staff members from other buildings that might be interested? How does that?
It is run within the building and staff within that building. Mrs. Hines, I don't know if you could speak any further to that, right? It depends on staff interest and student interest.
Historically, it's been student interest and then staff that we can run it. And because of the new pandemic funds, we've been able to add on clubs. But it has been something of a conversation over the past couple of years of how to streamline it, maybe have some anchor clubs that we'd like to do. So this might be the opportunity for us to move forward and see if we might be able to do that within the clubs, within our buildings.
Something I brought up last time that I think would help with some of the clubs and opportunities for our kids was that Economic Opportunity Council. Where's an update on that as far as whether or not we're going to be able to bring that group in to maybe provide clubs and opportunities or after-school activities for our kids?
Sorry, can you just remind me of that, Mr. Scavo? Oh, right. Yes. Thank you. I'm sorry. We actually did meet, myself, Ms. Salvia, Mr. Panassi, and Mr. Haran. We met with Ms. Amato. She is coming to the buildings. This was a grant that I wrote with Ms. Amato almost about 2 years ago, right before the pandemic. And I feel like I'm always saying that. But they are coming back in. They're going to do a visit to reissue all of the building permits, relook at the rooms, and then we expect to register and look to first focus on our sixth graders. It's about 110 students, I believe, at each middle school. So yeah, we're very pleased about that. Yep.
Thank you.
No problem.
Yes, please.
Yeah, just for a little protocol here on the future agenda items, and I support all the ones that were just mentioned, but we should really have a hand count, so, because we've had this issue before. You didn't have support for that item, why isn't it on the agenda, et cetera, et cetera. Why don't we just make it official? Like Matthew wants a discussion on middle school tennis, right? So why don't we just show a show of hands that we agree that the superintendent and his staff should come back to us for a discussion on moving that forward, just for protocol purposes,
I have no
guys.
issues with that, Jim, and if that's okay with everyone, that's fine. But my only issue is then now we're picking and choosing what, like, maybe this is something that's important to Matthew. Like, what I've never said to anybody no. If we brought it up, it's going to land on the agenda. Maybe not next time because so we don't have too many, but it's always gotten on the agenda.
But the problem with that, Alex, is that if we go down that path, then we could get inundated with items that are going to go on the agenda because one person decides they like that particular item. We're a board. And I think we should, if the majority of the board thinks that item should move forward and go on an agenda, then so be it. And, let's face it, 99% of them are going to go on the agenda.
Yeah.
Okay, but there may be that 1% somebody doesn't not want discussed.
Listen, I'll respectfully disagree. I only say that if Matthew's the only one who wants to talk about middle school tennis, and maybe he convinces us while he's talking, but we weren't all for it in the beginning. I'm just bringing it up because he said it tonight, but I would hate to start picking and choosing out here now which ones are not going to land on a future agenda. We haven't done that, and I don't remember Laura doing that either. I don't remember anybody ever
understand
doing
that this is new, but we've had issues. We've had issues, and you know what the issues are. And the people listening to us think it's going to happen because they heard us say, on a future agenda item, we're going to discuss this. And some of them don't get discussed. They don't make it. This just is solidifies it. That's all.
Yeah, let Mr. Reynolds go first, and then Mr. Scavo.
Yeah, I think it goes back more to tracking them, right? Because we say things, so I'm agreeing with you, Alex,
Yeah.
right? But it goes to my point, which I've asked the board, is how do we track these things? So if we can document them and track them so they don't fall off the table, I think that's what I'm looking for, right?
Yeah, and I think in the last
Let's
packet,
track
you
it. What's the
had,
next action item? Who's responsible? Who's going to get it to us? When are they going to get it to us? And then if it's a community issue, what's the feedback loop back to the community? So
In the last two packets, we started to put in the future presentations and the dates that those presentations will be taking place for the community. Tonight's request around a discussion around tennis, we could have, again, Mr. Butel here or someone from the athletics department. Mr. Bauman could speak to that. If others in the community know that that's on the agenda, they could come and speak to it as well, and it could be an impetus for something that we do or don't do based on the feedback that we get back from the community and athletics.
Mr. Scavo and then Mrs. Flattery, please.
Just in years past, anytime a future agenda item was asked of, the board president just said, is everybody okay with that? Is there any opposition to it? If there's no opposition, yes, go ahead, put it on the agenda.
Yeah.
I think that's, Jim, that's what you're asking for. So, and in all my years on the board, I don't ever remember one time when.
So now I'm going to remind you of the one time. Because it just popped into
Well, sure,
my COVID brain is very slow, but once in a while something pops in. My first year on the board, and you might not remember this, I wanted as a future agenda item to do a presentation on whole child education. I was going to have somebody come in that I knew that I had met going around, and there weren't 5 board members that agreed with that. So we didn't do the presentation. It was my first year on the board, and it was my first lesson that I should have called to maybe explain it better to people. I knew very well what whole child education was. I had gone to classes on it, and having a special needs child, it was something that I had researched on my own. And I just assumed that when you brought it up, everybody would be like, oh, okay, that's a good idea. You know somebody. It was Dr. Joe Rella was actually my person who introduced me to it, my friend Lori Corner. So that was just something, but it was a lesson learned on my part that just popped in to my head that I think I handled it wrong because maybe I didn't explain it right. But again, I might have been the only person on the board at that time that was interested in it. And so sort of what Jim is saying, you know, we all say, yeah, that's a great idea. Or like with the legislative thing tonight, yeah, that's a great idea. But if nobody else wants it and only one person wants it, then it wouldn't be a good idea, you know?
Yes, please.
I think actually what you would have done now with your experience is you would have said, can I have a discussion about that? And then at that discussion, you would have said, look, this is what I'd like to do, have a presentation. So
Yeah, I was
because
brand
fundamentally you don't
new,
want
I
to
didn't
knock
know
anybody's idea. I mean, I don't know enough about middle school tennis to know whether I would be in agreement or not be in agreement, right? We have no idea. So you don't want to kill the idea without at least some brief discussion. So I don't know. I don't know if we should be voting on. How would I vote on something like that? I don't know what the details are.
I'll tell you what. Here's what we'll do, so we don't go round and round, because I don't think the community wants to hear us do this anymore. But let's just say this: I'll ask, but if it starts to become a spiteful thing where people are certainly, and depending on who's bringing it up, are starting to say no a lot, then we'll readjust it. But if it's something that it's flowing well, then we'll just go from there. Good. The next meeting of the Board of Education will be on Wednesday, October. I'm sorry, Mrs. Brown. I apologize. So I don't know how anybody else feels about this. I just don't want public comment to become a tit for tat when somebody hears something that they might not like, then all of a sudden cards are filled out. So maybe that we have some type of timeline when a card gets filled out so that after the fact, now somebody would fill out a card in the future. So we'll do it for tonight, but maybe in the future at 7 or 7:30, we'll have like a deadline beforehand and then kind of go from there. Yes.
I think you're right. But let's make that clear.
Yeah.
And the clarity doesn't have to be a time.
Yeah.
Clarity, once the visitors section number 2 is over, it's over.
Yeah.
You know, if this is an exception, because we don't
Is
have.
everyone okay with tonight's exception, but moving forward?
I just had a couple of things.
Yes,
I just
please.
wanna- I'm sorry.
Yep.
I was waiting for the right time. All right, so because I got some emails about some things that I just wanted to address, and so speaking about the Family Connect Night, is there a reason why it's always on Wednesdays?
Yeah.
Because some people were complaining that that the board meetings are during Family Connect Night, and like I know for me, my son was very happy that I had a board meeting tonight, so he could play video games. But is there a reason why it's always on Wednesdays? Like, is there a formula that we're following?
I'd like to say that there is some intricate formula, but quite frankly, we just wanted to reinstitute it.
Yeah.
And my apologies profusely. I wrote to Ms. Favors, PTA Council, explaining the same. We will adjust it. The SEL chairs, myself, Ms. O'Doherty, we just wanted to get it back.
Right.
And Mr. O'Keefe was polite enough to share that it was on all Board of Ed meetings. So we would like all eyes here, and we will
Right.
be changing it, and I will send an update to the community.
But my son thanks you for that. And then there was just another thing. Apparently, like there's a lot of Jewish holidays, and they're not all so well known. But apparently, some students were getting homework on some of the Jewish holidays. I'm sure we tell our staff not to give homework.
I would say we will
And
reiterate
not
that
just
with
Jew, I'm
staff.
sorry, Muslim as well. There's other
No,
holidays
and
that
there
are
are,
not so popular as the traditional Christian holidays.
yeah, we recognize that students may have other obligations and would be excused from homework that night, but perhaps it would be due later that week or something along the lines of that. So we just ask that people be cognizant of that, and we'll follow up with that.
And just the last thing, so my son was contact traced. He's in 5th grade. He was contact traced. And then I just wanted to mention that Mrs. Laka is his teacher at Tamarack, and she did an amazing job with the
Home tutoring.
with the virtual part. And
Quarantine academic support.
Thank you. But anyway, she did a really terrific job. So I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you. Anyone want to plug any other staff members or anything like that? We welcome it. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Bauer.
Dominique Barone, please. Sorry, let's go this way. No. I'll give it to him at the end. He gets them all. Yeah.
Good evening. Thank you for letting me speak. This certainly isn't a tit for tat. It was deciding whether or not I wanted to get up here because public speaking is not my thing.
It wasn't for you,
So,
that comment. It was
okay.
just in general.
Okay. So I just wanted to speak in support of diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm a strong advocate for a curriculum based on the factual telling of history. Of course, I recognize that this has to be done in an age-appropriate way, especially for the elementary students. Some of the examples I can think of, just very simply off the top of my head, things that are coming up soon, Columbus Day. Teaching children that Christopher Columbus discovered America. I think, it would make sense to bring that up, that was a story that was once told, but, clearly we know different now. And also, having the children dress up as pilgrims and Indians during Thanksgiving. Might be cute, but it's a little offensive, especially for the indigenous population. So those are just two of the things. I also wanted to publicly show my support for the LGBTQ community. There's a lot of things that are discussed in this room from the audience that could be offensive and harmful for people in that community. So I wanted to openly show my support, particularly on the anniversary of the murder of Matthew Shepard. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay. The next meeting of the Board of Education will be Wednesday, October 20th, here in the annex at 7 p.m. Can I please have I don't have it from here.
Mr. Grillo, can I jump in for 1
Yep.
second and just thank everyone here tonight for how we spoke to each other and in support of each other. Thank you very much, everyone in here in attendance tonight. Thank you.
Chris, you want to just go through?
Yeah,
what we're
motion go into
exec-
executive session for the purposes of discussing the employment of particular personnel, collective negotiations, and matters relating to a particular student.
Perfect. Motion by Mr. Slattery, seconded by Mr. Reynolds. All in favor? Thank you, everyone.